Yes, folks, Alan Jones teared up yesterday while reporting on the drought crisis in Australia, and justifiably so because Scott Morrison hasn't got a clue what he's doing. The more I see him, the more I see just another latte-sipping soy boy who's stuck in the Canberra bubble. He makes good speeches, but he really doesn't walk the walk. Now, Alan Jones was absolutely correct yesterday when he called out Morrison over his lack of understanding and respect to farmers, the forgotten people, and the forgotten industry. But first, have a listen to this to give you a bit of background.
The direct cash grant support going into farming communities, including directly to farmers, in the year just finished.
They're not getting it.
Alan, if you could let me finish, is 318.5 million. Now we're going to do around.
I don't know where the money is, Prime Minister. I don't know where that
Alan,
is.
I can tell you where it is. If you've asked me to come on the program, I'm happy to do it. Love to. And let me tell you where that 318 million goes. There was $129.5 million, which was extending the farm household allowance in that year. There was $5 million in rural financial counselling services. There was $115.8 million that went directly into communities, drought communities, into individual shires, $1 million into each shire.
PM, how does that feed a cow? PM, how does that feed a cow?
I'd like to answer you.
How does it feed a cow, PM?
And I'm sure your listeners would like to know where that 300 million plus has gone in the past year. $15 million to help them with looking after the pests and weeds in their property.
Pests and weeds. My God, he doesn't have a clue.
How does that feed a cow? How does that feed
Alan,
a cow?
If you've got pests and weeds which are running over your property,
don't talk to me. I'm a farmer's son. You're not.
Directly, Alan. And now, as you know, the fodder subsidies and the freight subsidies are provided by state governments. That's part of the National Drought Agreement.
They can't afford their component of the subsidy. They can't afford it.
Alan, what I'm telling you is that the fodder subsidies and the freight subsidies are handled by state governments. The direct financial
I know. It's a national disaster, PM. Take over the whole show. Why don't you take over the whole show? It's a national disaster. You say farm household allowance. Now, PM, come on. You go and tell Jenny that she can live on $250 a week. They get $250 a week.
$250 a week.
It is $250 a week.
It's not just that, because unlike any other form of income support in the country, if you live in the city and your business goes bust or you lose your job, then you have access to New Start, and that's available to everybody across the country.
How does that feed a cow and to keep it alive?
But if you are on a farm property and you're a farmer or a grazier, you get access during drought periods, and not just in drought periods, to the farm household allowance.
Well, PM, why are they walking off? Why are they walking off? Why are they sending their cattle to slaughter? If we lose the breeding stock, we've got...
That's why.
Well, how can you make sure we don't send our breeding stock to slaughter?
Alan, there is the government, whether it's state, federal, or anyone else, we can do a lot of things to help people try and get through this. But the government cannot make it rain, and the government can't make life as it was before the drought. And if anyone is suggesting that could be done, then they are lying to the people of rural and regional Australia.
I'm asking you.
That is an unrealistic
expectation.
That,
PM, seriously.
So we will keep investing, Alan.
No.
We will keep investing. We will keep responding. And I was at the National Farmers Federation 40th anniversary last night.
I know.
And the number of farmers who came up to me and said, we thank the government for the support they're providing.
Well, I must be talking to none of them. I must see none of them, PM. I'm asking you again the question. In anything you've said to me today, how does that encourage a farmer to say, as a result of what Scott Morrison told Alan Jones today, I won't have to sell my cattle, my breeding stock. I will be able to feed them next week. I will be able to get the fodder and water, which I can't afford now, and I will be able to get it from Victoria, but I can't afford the freight now. How, in anything that you have said to me today, will we be able to prevent the farmers from selling their breeding stock? And if you sell the breeding stock, then the rural industry is dead.
Exactly. And you can clearly see Morrison doesn't have a clue about the urgency. And you can clearly see why Alan Jones is getting frustrated with him and getting emotional over this issue. Have a look.
We'll be speaking to Pauline Hanson later on in the program about the drought and farmers, and in particular the virtual destruction of rural Australia by the mass disposal of breeding stock, dairy, beef and sheep. By the way, can the thoroughbred industry be far behind? Of course, people in Canberra who know nothing about farming continue to fail to understand that once the nation's breeding stock are decimated, so is our rural industry. The Prime Minister today talked about weed management and money to councils and household allowances and mental health. They're certainly drought issues, but they're side issues. The real issue today is to save our genetics, breeding stock.
Yes, and I can completely understand that, as I was raised on a farm as well. And getting the breeding stock right takes decades. It's one of the most fundamental parts of farming.
So farmers can start again. There is no fodder left in these drought areas. They can't afford freight. There must be a moratorium on bank debt. There must be help with water and electricity. Where things stand today politically is this: drought and the farmer are now a massive political issue. The backlash against the government is viral. Yet in question time today, it was as if the drought didn't exist. On Friday of last week, Mark from Burke rang me. The call was frightening in its intensity, anger and anguish. I put the call up on my Facebook page, Alan Jones Australia. It has been heard to date by over 430,000 Australians. Thousands and thousands of them have commented in disgust and anger. I think you need to hear this. This was the call. Mark, good morning.
Mate, I'm calling. I'm calling because at the last election I voted for Scott Morrison. I voted for him because I thought he was our hope. I'm out here in the back of Burke, mate. Our river's going to be dry at the end of December. I've got 4 kids and 3 of them have moved away because we've got no hope out here. Now, we're a tough mob out here, Alan. We're a real tough mob. We put up with drought and we put up with dust storms, but we always have hope. Now, I'm an old football coach like you. And when I used to coach sides and we'd get beaten, I'd say, no worries, fellas. You know, next time we play them, we got to do this. But we got no hope, mate. They're not giving us anything. Scott's not saying to us. He's not saying, listen, we're going to build a weir. We're going to build a dam. Don't worry, when it rains, we know it'll rain. We've been down here for a bloody 150 years, mate. We know it's going to rain. But what's going to happen when it rains? Are we going to be back in this situation? Give us some bloody hope, Scott. My town is dying. The country's dying. And you're not giving us hope. I've got a son that lives in Ballina. He rings me up. I said, when you coming home, mate? When you coming home to see me and Mum, mate? And he said, why, Dad? Why? He said, why? There's nothing out there. He said, there's nothing to come home to.
Oh, that just breaks your heart.
Following that, I have been swamped with correspondence, obviously. And Canberra had better start understanding the gravity of the situation. They're still not addressing. It's one thing to talk about building dams, though even that is pie in the sky, but it is the here and now that has to be addressed. I said to one farmer last week, how are the banks? He looked at me and said, how much further can you go when you get to 1.3 million? It's no use talking about freight subsidies. Farmers don't have the money to pay anything, and they can't afford the feed and the fodder. Put those 3 together, fodder, water and freight, and the cost is literally killing the farmer and rural Australia. And whatever Canberra ignores this, they're in a massive political mess. One letter in relation to Mark's call stands out above the others. I'll call the 28-year-old married woman who wrote, I'll call her for convenience sake Mary. As you know, Mark said he's from Burke. Mary wrote, and I quote, Alan, to the people of Burke and the surrounding communities, it was a call that showed every local person's pain. It cut us open. As Mark broke down for everyone to hear, we all felt his pain, our pain, Burke's pain. It's all the same. I no longer live in Burke. My family moved in 2005 when I was in year 9. I'm now 28, married with 2 wonderful kids. I was in the same year as Mark's son, who lives in Ballina. I too bleed the same as Mark at Burke. For them and with them. You see, Mark from Burke isn't just any old broken bloke. Mark's a pillar of the community out there. He coached football for years and years. If there was an event on, you could count on Mark to be there, always out in the community, always doing something. So if Mark is on a national radio show breaking down in front of you all, it really is because he has nothing left. There is no hope. And if he's saying it, it's because that's what the community is feeling. He's always been one to speak up, speak out when things aren't right. Mark is right, the town is dying. Many towns are dying. I too voted for Scott Morrison on the premise that something was going to be done.
Yes, and as I've said before, folks, Scott Morrison only got elected because he was the lesser of the two evils.
Nothing has happened. There have been no drought-proofing plans. There is always lots and lots of talk. I'm aware that this isn't Australia's only issue. I also understand that there's a process for the things to progress. The drama is that they're running out of time, money, patience, hope and water. When people in these communities run out of hope, they break. And they're going to break. They're going to leave. They're going to lose themselves, unquote. Think about that sentence. They're going to lose themselves. What's that mean?
It means suicide.
Mary ends, my hope, as I'm sure it is the hope of a lot of other struggling Australians, is that Scott Morrison starts looking after his own backyard. They can actually do something about it instead of worrying about what's happening in other countries. I wish you luck, she said, with the Prime Minister, and I thank you for always fighting for what you believe in, for what we believe in. Well, the Prime Minister today on radio with me has disappointed millions of Australians. I begged him to provide fodder, water and freight so that farmers wouldn't have to send their breeding stock to slaughter. He just didn't understand. 10 minutes later, William, from up near Gunnedah, a farmer, rang in and started to cry. His family had been in farming for 70 years. He was sending 90 breeders to the sale yard in Gunnedah today. And to you, Mary, and I know that's not your name, we will fight because I have been exactly where the people of Burke are. My old man would be ashamed of me if I didn't fight. I can't speak for Canberra. Take a break.
No, don't take a break.
Yeah, here we are. Look, sorry about that, but what I was saying to you, Mary, and I know you're watching because I communicated with you, and I know that's your name, we will fight because I've been exactly where the people of Burke are. My old man would be ashamed of me if I didn't fight. I can't speak for Canberra other than to say they have never been where we have been. My mother was a smart one in our family, and at times like these, I'm always reminded of what she taught me from an early age. I quote what she'd say, and I've never forgotten it. Better to walk alone than to walk with the mob in the wrong direction. The one consolation, Mary, is that we're not alone. And that's why the Morrison government tonight has a massive political issue on its hands. It can be solved, but it better be solved in a hurry or the political fallout will be terminal.
And while genuine Australians, these farmers and their families are in dire straits, Canberra is talking about this.
The father of one of the Australian women trapped in a Syrian detention camp has begged the Morrison government to rescue his daughter and grandchildren. Labor's also put more pressure on the government for action to be taken to help Australians who do have links to Islamic State, but so far the government remains unmoved.
A father's desperate plea.
Action can still be taken, but I think that's a situation of days rather than weeks.
Kamal Debussi's daughter Mariam and his 3 grandchildren are trapped in a detention camp in northern Syria.
In my daughter's case, quite specifically and quite clearly, she was coerced into going, and that's basically at gunpoint, and she was dragged across the border.
She's one of at least 66 Australians, many of them children under 5, stuck in the camp alongside 70,000 Islamic State families. And 2 more Australians have emerged among them overnight.
The child is quite ill. The mother appears to have been targeted by the radicalised women in the camps before. She's been beaten with metal poles.
Their fate fraught with danger as Turkey's invasion of Kurdish-controlled territory in Syria fuels fears of breakouts and brutality.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see what Scott Morrison does with these people. Yes, folks, I think you can easily answer that for yourselves. Scott Morrison is no Donald Trump. I doubt very much he will put Australia first. Now, in his foreign policy speech the other day, he intimated that he was opposed to globalisation, but I'm not buying one word of it.